warm welcome. You're joining us here at Hyde Park on Ada Derana 24. Just days ago, Sri Lanka declared its $51 billion debt, default of its debt. And here we are tonight to talk about Sri Lanka's way forward, measures we will take to contain the economic crisis and to move forward. I've invited to our studios the new Finance Minister, President's Counsel Ali Sabry. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Indeewari, for having me here.
I've spoken to you before as a legal expert, then as Justice Minister, and here you're seated before us as the Finance Minister. On the 4th of April, you were appointed Finance Minister, you were sworn in, and then on the 5th, you resigned. Again, on the 8th of April, you informed Parliament that you're still Finance Minister because the President rejected your resignation. Why have you been given this task?
Basically, I think for two reasons. Number one is no one else wants to take it, hopefully. And number two is President must be thinking, along with the other leaders of our party and the members of our parliamentary group, that I can do the job. So both those combinations, hopefully.
Can you do the job? I mean, you've been working on a policy towards the justice, the legal reforms, the justice ministry, and laws reforms. Here, this is finance. Is this a subject that's totally new to you?
Yeah, it is a subject which is new to me. So, but what is more important than that is someone must do the job. Finance ministry, you can't leave it open or without a man running the finance ministry for too long. It is bigger than you, bigger than your party, bigger than anything else, because it's about your country. So until and unless I told that the Parliament, if anyone is better, we invited the opposition to come and form a government. They didn't come. We offered this to any experts in the opposition, no anywhere else. They didn't come. So but until such time, I need to do my job for my country, because this is a national call. So I just couldn't sleep for 3-4 days. Knowing that, I was only thinking of myself, my image, when the country is in need of somebody to steer it. So I may not be the best person, but I'm the person who is available now. So I have to do it and I have to take it. And I'm confident, being a lawyer, we are trained to listen. You don't need to be an expert of everything and anything. For example, I was telling the other day, then transport minister has to be either a motor mechanic or a good qualified Formula One driver. No, you don't need to. What you need is a little bit of common sense, the ability to listen to people and identify the best options available to you out of several options and take decisions and press ahead.
Why did you resign? You were a minister for a day when you resigned.
Exactly. So that's what I told. When I was appointed, I was not ready. You would have seen that. I didn't even wear my jacket when I went and took the oaths, because I went for a discussion. Then I ended up in so much, everybody requested, I ended up thinking of the country and took it over. Then there was massive criticism on the part of so many people saying that we need an economist, and then my family also was worried with the ongoing violent protests going all over. So I thought we'll give it to someone else. Now I wrote that if anyone even willing from outside the Parliament, I'll step down from my parliamentary seat and provide him this thing, because what's important is somebody to run the job. But 3, 4, 5 days, no one was coming forward. Some critical decisions were to be taken in terms of representing IMF, engaging with the IMF, talking to the World Bank to get something emergency funding, then impending hard debt default, which was very clear in front of us. So any day or every minute without a finance minister was bad. So you had to take that call.
But you've taken over at the most difficult time for our economy, the worst crisis our economy has faced since independence.
Yes.
Did the President assume, you were his attorney, that you will bail out the economy just as you represent him previously? Or is it just that the finance ministry needs somebody who would take strict decisions and put policy right? Because it looks like your government waited until it was too late to address this situation.
I do agree with you. Some of those decisions could have been taken earlier. And yes, I have to have a free hand here. I need a set of professionals who will run this. I'm not interested in contesting any more elections. In that sense, I can take strong decisions for the betterment of the country. So whatever the decisions which is good and in the national interest may not be most popular, but need to be taken. I'm willing to take those decisions, Indeewari.
Now, there are claims that the government should have gone into a soft default. Let's move to talk a little about yesterday's announcement on Tuesday this week, that government defaulted on your debt. But there were red flags raised, there was warning signs since 2019 and 2022. Your government failed to look into this matter and address it. But now the opposition has been calling for a flotation of the rupee and then restructuring of debt. But with yesterday's decision, we hear opposition factions saying that you shouldn't have gone into a hard default. You should have waited until you work with the IMF. How do you respond to this? Was this the right decision?
No, it was the right decision in the circumstances. A hard default is, Indeewari, is that when the payment is due on the 18th, which was about $150 million plus $78 million, close to about 200 million. For this month alone, 500 million, next month another 500 million, and July, we all know, 1 billion. So 2 billion to pay, we just don't have money to pay. So if you would have waited for till the 18th and not paid, that's the hard default. Now what we have done right now, a preemptive default, which is called as a technical default. So given the circumstances, this is the best we could do. But coming back to what the opposition said, when we paid in January 500 million, it is the opposition we told, why are you paying the money which you have to feed your people? Don't pay. This is a time for a debt restructuring. Yes, that's how opposition is. They want to play politics here. Debt restructuring, yes, there was a delay in that. We should have done that or started the process at least a year ago. I thought it would have been 2 years ago. We should have started the process. And then floating, we should have done it rather than floating, a controlled depreciation. If you look at in India in 1990, Manmohan Singh ji, he depreciated 9% on Monday, and he depreciated 11% on Wednesday. It's similar crisis they had, India. 2 weeks of imports, the whole Indian economy was in tatters, and then he has to take over, and he guided it. At that time, some of those decisions were taken, but those decisions were taken in the right time. But
here, what happened here?
I think there were few decisions. I mean, if you look at it, though we were in the cabinet, technically we were confined to look into our areas of it. We were vociferous. We were telling this. And I think entirety of the cabinet was saying that about a year ago we must go to IMF. But decisions relating to the economy was handled by a handful of officials. We all know that. And all four of them, former two governors, former president to the former secretary to the treasury, and former secretary to the president, all of them who were running the economy, for whatever the reason, they would have had some alternative planning or homegrown solutions to say so. They were against going to IMF and debt restructuring. But unfortunately, it was obvious those alternatives were not sustainable. Those alternatives were not plausible.
But why wasn't a political decision taken in this regard with the finance minister, the president? You say the officials didn't take these decisions, but politically, this discussion came up in Parliament as well.
Yeah, I know. So basically, you are as good as your support team. You know, you totally rely for a long period of time. These are the guys who can fix the economy. And until it was too late, and it's obvious that when these queues have started to come, we did not have money to pay, and then we have spent all our reserve defending the rupee. Then all of a sudden, you are forced to wake up from your slumber. By that time, it was little too late. But some of these decisions, I agree with you, should have been taken earlier, including restructuring the funds, slowly depreciating the rupee rather than floating it overnight, right? And then debt restructuring, several of those decisions could have been done earlier. And this was in the limelight. People have been talking about this at least for the last 1 year or so.
It's now day 5 of the Gulf Face Green Go Home Gota campaign, the protest, and the Prime Minister has expressed willingness to engage with the protesters and to listen to their demands, what these demands are. Does it mean the government is still unclear of what they want and what they're demanding for?
Yes, there is a lack of clarity on that. You know, so you need to understand we have a constitution in this country. That's the supreme law of the country. Anything that we do should be in terms of the constitution. No, you can't just throw the constitution away. We have seen wherever the constitution has been broken, what has happened. And 2 years ago in 2018, you remember, the same people who have been fighting to safeguard the constitution, protect the constitution, and we went to the Supreme Court, and 7 judges of the Supreme Court said, you can't act outside the constitution in terms of appointing prime minister or the cabinet and all those things. Here they are, the same group is demanding that the president who had been elected for 5 years should immediately step down. Prime President and the Prime Minister should step down, and the entirety of the cabinet and the 225 also step down. That seems to be their demand. If that I don't know that's the right approach, because then where is the government? Who's going to run? What is the next step? If
I may ask you a few questions on the legality and constitutionality of it, especially because you're an expert in this. What really is possible? There is a campaign asking the president to go home and the government also to go home. Some rejecting the entire parliament. But what's possible in terms of our constitution? Can the president go home, or should the parliament be dissolved, and should we go for fresh elections if not?
No, basically 2 things are possible. Up until 2.5 years of the term, even president cannot dissolve the parliament in terms of the 20th Amendment. Earlier, so if the people in the parliament, including the opposition, wants to dissolve the parliament, they must come with a no confidence motion. They come out with that, and even with the no confidence motion, president still can't dissolve the even if he lose the no confidence motion, president cannot dissolve the parliament. 50% of the parliamentary majority must resolve a resolution and request the president to dissolve the parliament. Then only a new election could be held prior to 2.5 years. So that is how we are right now. And then the asking president to resign, I mean, I don't know how fair that for a president who had been elected for 5 years, 2.5 years have gone now, 2.5 years to go. Even if the president, say, steps down, then power goes back to the parliament again. Prime Minister will be the caretaker, and in the meantime there will be an election. Sorry, election within the parliament. Within the parliament. So somebody from the parliament again becomes the president for the rest of the term. So in terms of the constitution, you can't have an election immediately. So these are complex legal issues and constitutional issues, which I don't think most of the protesters understand that. And protesters seems to be leaderless.
The government calls for a national government. These calls went unheeded. What do you think is the reason for this, when the opposition and all parties were concerned about the way the economy is managed? They wanted to play a bigger role in the government. Did you genuinely extend an invitation? Was there room for the opposition parties to play a role in helping a way out of this economic crisis?
I really don't know who had take it. The road ahead is very, very difficult and challenging. Some very difficult decisions need to be taken. Leave aside the taking over the government, no one wants to take the Ministry of Finance, because that difficult is the job. But that doesn't mean that you just run away from a challenge. You know, if you say, now in Sinhala you say the famous pala we all know, in Sinhala you say, යුද්ධයට නැති කඩුව කොස් කොටන්නද. So that means that whatever the strength you have, if you don't use it in time of a war or in time of a challenge or in time of a need, what's the point of having that? So this is the time for these experts to come in, because anybody to come and even say the protesters to come and run economy at least to be salvaged. You know, I understand that we have gone for a technical default, yes, but that's not the end of the road. Several other countries have gone through. Recently, if you look at last 4 or 5 years also, there have been several countries, Argentina, Ecuador, even during the Asian financial crisis, ASEAN financial crisis, like South Korea, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, they all went through severe hardships. So this is a situation where we simply cannot pay the debts which we have to pay, particularly in foreign currency.
You're due to meet IMF officials to negotiate a deal for Sri Lanka, and this proposal has to be taken from the Sri Lankan party, and they say Sri Lanka needs to have a proper proposal and program in place before you negotiate this with the IMF. Are you prepared?
We are in the course of preparation. Today also my officials have had a discussion with that, with experts and with various support groups, and the expert panel which the President has appointed. So we are been working, and we are in the process of preparation.
What will Sri Lanka look at here? Because there have been calls to select a proper advisory board, as well as those who will advise Sri Lanka in negotiating this debt. Has due focus and attention being given to this? Yeah,
there are 5 areas which I am focused right now. One is the immediate crisis management.
Right.
That is, we need to have that support, that you call it as in the mitigating the pain. So how to restore the supply chain, how to avoid this, the gas queue, the petrol queue, the diesel queue, the kerosene queues, and also the electricity cut and all those things. Get the normal life back on track. That's the immediate plan. So we need to talk to our partners and get that going. So several attempts are going on. Today you would have seen, consequent to my discussion a couple of days ago, World Bank had today released $110 million for medicine. We are planning to meet them also for a larger proposal to them. So that's the immediate contingency. That's why the Indian credit line had come in very handy at this very, very difficult time, kind of a lifeline. We are discussing that to be continued so that the normal life comes back. Number 2. So number 2 is, as you say, that the debt restructuring that has to take place in a very orderly manner. For us to do that, we have already kind of floated the RFP for appointment of the financial advisor and the legal advisor. Hopefully within next 14 to 21 days we will appoint them, and then take it in that sense. Now that debt servicing burden is out of us, then you are looking at the bridging finances. During that bridging finances period, whether IMF can help us, World Bank can help us, ADB can help us, our friends can help us, so that we get on board again and the normal life can start and the normal structures go on. Fourthly, important thing is the important fiscal reforms need to take place in terms of tax revisions and realistic prices, and looking at the loss-making SOEs. So that's one area of it. So it's and thereafter we must find a way. Whatever we do, we are going to IMF will not solve all our problems. So it only gives a little bit of confidence for us, and some lifeline in terms of bridging finance. But it is for the Sri Lankan people to, on the ground, to restore our economic growth. That can only happen when the productions comes back to the normal in terms of our crops, in terms of our agriculture, and then our production lines in garment trade, restoring our tourism and fisheries, IT sector, and all those things. So when you do that and there is production only, we can actually see real growth in our economy. So it is a complex process, and I understand that to a great extent because I listen to people. As a lawyer, that's a trait we used to listen, and that has helped me to have a grasp of what is required to be taken. So if you look at it, you can confine it to last 2-3 years, but it's not the case. Since 1947, we have lived beyond our means by borrowing beyond our means, and now it's the reality check.
The opposition has critiqued the government's approach to the IMF or with the IMF on how the rupee was floated and how the suspension of debt repayments was handled. But again, with Tuesday's decision to default debt, we see that we don't send a very good message to our investors. That confidence you spoke about, there will be a deterioration of investor confidence in Sri Lanka. The Samagi Jana Balawegaya led by Sajith Premadasa says that this required the consent of bondholders. That this could have been done in such a way so that you don't really destroy the kind of reputation and the confidence that these investors have on Sri Lanka. How do you respond to this?
No, the opposition and all the experts were in the same page in saying that debt has to be restructured. You should have gone to the IMF. Rupee should have been depreciated. There is no two words about it. Now these things have taken place. The manner in which they have taken place is not the most suitable way, because instead of depreciating the rupee, we have just floated it, and we are finding it difficult to now control that. Number two is, yes, we could have gone earlier, spoken to the IMF, appointed our legal advisors and the financial advisors, and then gone for a moratorium. But the situation is such that by the time I took, within 24 hours, I floated the RFPs. But we can't pay the money what is coming out. It is the same opposition when we paid last year 1 billion and this year January 500 million. Even in the parliament asked us, why did you go and pay these bondholders when the country can't feed its population? Now when we have paid, now we have suspended, is a different tone. So it's easy for you to be in the opposition and criticize it. It's very difficult to run, and Sri Lanka has known to doing that. In the opposition, you come and criticize everybody. You get ready to win the next election, but you never get ready to run the country, and that's our problem. This has been compounded. Everybody wants to please the masses and give them, do all sorts of tamashas and give them handouts, and as a result of which our economy has really taken a beating. Our revenue is less than our recurrent expenditure, which is the bill what we need to pay. That bad is the situation. So this is a reality check. Good that you have to do those reforms now than 10 years down the line. No.
Is there a political will to do these reforms at this juncture? Because we've been talking about governments having a sufficient mandate to bring in necessary reforms, but we saw these governments failing to do it. And your government too got a massive mandate from the people. Yet these consistent policies and the reforms necessary were not done. We saw this happening by consecutive governments. But today, do you have the political will?
Now we have no choice. It's probably a blessing in disguise. If you don't do these reforms, I don't want to talk about the crisis, what could happen. We have seen that what happened in Lebanon and all those things. So it is now or never. It is a moment of truth. We need to take those hard decisions. And political will has to be there. President has told that whatever the right decision, take it. And he has given the green light. And I have been given freedom to discuss with all the experts. We have a professional governor, not a politician. We have appointed an experienced officer as a secretary to the ministry. We have some internationally acclaimed advisors in terms of Professor Chanta Devarajan, Professor Dr. Kumaraswamy and Shamini, all of them. So we are talking to them, and we are also consulting several others. For example, even today, I have had already discussion with UNDP economist, and I will be talking to World Bank, UD, and local economist, and we will see how we can come over this. Because We have 22 million people in this country, only 250,000 income tax files. How are you going to run a country? You can't run a country like that. So if our growth to be sustainable, the people who are on protest also has a responsibility to pay their taxes on time. You know, without payment of tax, it's not only the politicians could have done it better, but how many of us paid our taxes on time? How many of us send your money through the proper channels? How many of us declare all the income and income or the real value when you import? All these have compounded the situation. Easiest thing is to find fault with the politicians. Politicians have to take the blame because they are the leaders. They get credit for everything good, so they have to take the lion's share of the blame. But just blaming politicians is not going to help.
Just days ago, you made a plea to the Sri Lankan expatriates overseas. We'll talk about that when we return after this short break at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24. Welcome back. We're in conversation with the new Finance Minister, Ali Sabry, joining us. Lawyer, attorney, President's Counsel turned Minister to take over the Justice Matters, Justice Minister, now Finance Minister. But during this period of time, we saw the opposition claiming that Sri Lanka's economic situation, while it's worsening, while Sri Lanka is bankrupt, while, you know, the people are queued outside refueling stations, that by June, the economy wouldn't be able to run. It'll come to a standstill. Will the measures that you're taking right now bring us back in some way or the other? How do you foresee the future in the next 2 months?
Do you have a choice? We need to fight back. You can't just tell us that, and we cannot be pessimistic either. This is our country. We need to reclaim it. There are no two words about it. We are going through the worst economic crisis in the history. There are no two words about it. But then underlying reasons, if you want to point fingers, this can go up to where the Vijay came, you know, pointing everybody else he was responsible. No, that's not the issue here. Right now, how to claim our country back, how to get back on track, and this is everyone's responsibility. This is not about a person, this is not about a party, this is not about politics, this is about the country. So therefore, it's important that anyone who wants or slightest interest in the country must think that we must preserve what could be preserved, our institutions, our banks, our banking system, our civil service, our salaries. So by pressing the panic button, you are not going to help that. So what they are saying is on the line of their expectation, that is the Indian credit line will end, and then there will be no money to import everything else. But that's not the case. We are discussing for an extension of the Indian credit line. So the positive part of this, the technical default, no one is talking about. Now all this while, what we did was we get all the money in the banking system, collect all those things and pay the debt. As a result of which, you did not have enough money to import the goods that you want, and that is one of the reasons for these queues to continue. So going forward, but we feel that all the money which comes to the central bank in the short term or in the medium term could be utilized to import our goods and all those things. So there will be less pressure on our forex crisis. With that, we are also working out two specific things. One is emergency relief. We are talking to World Bank, we are talking to IMF, we are talking to UNDP, we are going to UN. So in what way they could help us in different ways. Third limb is that we are also talking to the Indian government to extend the credit line for a little further period, because if Indians have been supported us so much, for them also to get our money back. Country's economy should fight back and bounce back. So they understand that. They will. I'm very confident that we will. I have had discussion. I'm meeting Her Excellency the Minister of Finance of the Indian government when I'm in Washington. We have already scheduled. I'm confident they will also extend that. I'm also talking to the Chinese government. So far, the Chinese government response has been good. So it's not that everything is lost. Yes, we are in the worst economic crisis. Yes, it's going to be worse before it gets better. But I'm confident if all of us work together and if all of us do our part as the government, as the opposition, as the members of the public, you send your money through the proper channels. You declare your the real income and pay your tax, we can get back. And we can actually, this could be a blessing in disguise. If you look at some of the countries, now India, as I told earlier, in 1990, underwent a massive crisis like this. 2 weeks of imports they had money for. They have to physically take the gold and go and give it to the Bank of England. RBI has to give that. But they bounced back. And today they are one of the biggest economies in the world. Last year, only from IT, their income was $155 billion US. So everything is possible, but we need to be patient, we need to be realistic, we need to be honest, we need to be truthful. This rosy pictures of giving that everything is fine, nothing will happen, we will have homegrown solution, it's not going to work. This is we have to meet this reality.
But this homegrown solution came from your side. Your government has been saying we're not going to the IMF because we have our own solutions here. You have been averse to working with the IMF, claiming that their conditions are not acceptable to Sri Lanka. But today, is the government prepared to take those political measures and decisions to work in line with IMF conditions? How can we, how can the country comply with those, especially by a government that earlier was not willing to work with the IMF?
No, we need to be realistic on the ground. And it is also important that IMF proposal itself is saying, look after the poorest of poor, the lowest ebb of the society. So we will have a safety net to look after them. We will find a way to help them. But in the meantime, people who need to pay tax must pay tax. Our tax net has to be widened.
But shouldn't the reforms come from within the regulator's side also?
Yes, reforms must come all over. So fiscal policy reforms are necessary. The loss-making state institutions need to be re-looked at it. You call it a Jatika Sampad, it's not Jatika Sampad, it's Jatika Khadaka. So all our monies have been drained by them. The loss of the first 15 institutions for a year, for the last 10 years or so, runs into trillions, so it cannot. So these are white elephants we are trying to maintain. So those have to be re-looked at it. But vulnerable segment of our community should be looked after. We must invest on our agriculture, we must invest on our education and the human resources. But we have to have a proper our priorities need to be reset and right decisions need to be taken. And people have to pay their taxes.
You also said be truthful, be honest. People have been calling for the politicians to be transparent, to be honest, truthful. We've been having a lot of discussion about campaign financing. Will Parliament be pushed to bring about reforms in that area, given the kind of pressure that the young people and the general public are putting on Parliament?
Exactly. That's a good way going forward, because I think we have already started the process of campaign financing to a great extent. So we need to have it. And when I came to politics, I declared everything of mine, and I gave it to the election commissioner, to the Parliament. And then once I became a minister, it has to be given to the President's office. I've always done that. It has to, going forward, you must show how do you earn all this money. If you can't show the source of your funding, then it has to be kind of seized and given to the government.
Let's talk a little about the young people of this country. You mentioned Jatika Sampata. We're talking about national resources here. The young people are the future of this country, but you see thousands out there on the streets in protest, calling for, in what they call a struggle to save Sri Lanka. What of the future of these young people? As we talk about a crisis today, you express confidence that we will come out of this. But education to other reforms and regulations, how willing is the government to look at other areas also while working on the financial aspect?
No, first of all, as a member of the cabinet, and somebody who had been in the government for the last 18 months or so, I must apologize for the hardships they are undergoing. No, it's entirely not our making. Different other circumstances also contributed to this, like the COVID, the Ukrainian war, the previous problems, but we have to take responsibility as the government. So the future generation and the youngsters are our future. So it is our duty as the governing party and the politicians and the leaders to provide a platform for them to perform. So we need to quickly get that supply chain restored, get confidence on them, and provide them to perform. The areas that we are looking at, the agriculture, the fisheries, the IT sector, the industries, the service sector, the port city, there are massive opportunities here because our kids and our youngsters are comparatively very intelligent and their literacy rate is very high. We must tap that in order to go to the next level. This protest is not only against current government and the current president. I think they are kind of revolting against the system, which is, I think, fair enough. By the time we got our independence 70 years ago, we were tipped to be the next Switzerland of South Asia. That's how. When Mr. Lee Kuan Yew took over, he told that he wants to make Singapore a Colombo in years to come. But whoever who had governed this country, we have come to this sad situation today. So I think this is a reality check. It's no point of pointing fingers. We must take leadership here, courageous decisions, and look after our country so there is a country for the future. Because Sri Lanka has enormous potential. For example, tourism. We just still have only, last year we got less than 200,000 tourists. Our potential in 2018 was 2.4 million tourists. So potential is to have about 4 to 5 million tourists within next 4 or 5 years. So there's absolutely a lot of potential in all areas. So we need to provide a platform. And that's one of the reasons which, with all the enormous personal and other challenges, it didn't give me to abandon the ship and stay away when the country needs you the most, though it is not my comfort zone.
A couple of days ago, you invited the expatriate community, the Sri Lankan expatriates, to support Sri Lanka, to help Sri Lanka with the much needed foreign reserves. You asked them to send funds through the proper channels, the official channels. Again, we saw during the COVID time that especially our expatriate remittances, workers' remittances, did not come through the official channels. But then are you working on the regulatory mechanism to encourage these funds to come to Sri Lanka directly?
We are looking at it, but at the end of the day, it's very, very difficult for us to go and man them in the places where they are living. You know, you have to look at it because these are people who are in the Middle East, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in South Korea, in Japan. So they have the freedom as to how they should send the money and all those things.
Why not encourage them with a scheme that actually benefits them?
We are looking at it, but it has to be practical also. Some of the things what everybody is saying in the social media cannot be done. No, but if you look at in 2020, we got 7.2 billion worth of remittance. Last year it came down to 5.7 billion. That is because the gap between the official and unofficial channels was so high. So people for 10 rupees, 20 rupees, 30 rupees, 40 rupees more for $1 when 203 they were getting, they started sending it through that. At that time I thought we waited for a too long a period until these channels were firmly established. Now breaking those channels are very, very difficult. But what now we feel is when those bridging finances comes in, when the pressure on repayment of debts are not there, then there is plenty of dollars available in the banks. The difference between the official and unofficial channels will kind of narrow down. With that will prompt the people to send the money through the proper channels. Hope that will happen. And in the meantime, we are also looking at whatever the incentives we could give, but it has to be practical. Everything what these people are discussing cannot be done. That can have a lot of counterproductive measures in place.
When are you due to leave for IMF talks?
I'm leaving on the 16th, and I'll be there. First meeting probably on the 18th onwards. For about 6 days we have meeting scheduled with a lot of multilateral agencies, as well as bilateral meetings with finance ministers of the interested countries in Indeewari.
Okay. We're trying to understand what it means to go to the IMF, to talk to them and negotiate this, because for a long time we've been saying, okay, let's go to the IMF, let's go to the IMF, but finally Sri Lanka's finance minister will be negotiating a deal. What does it mean now we're in a default state and you're going to the IMF? What will you be talking about? Will you come back with a favorable solution, or does it take a longer time to negotiate this? Let's talk about that.
No, it might take a little bit of time for negotiation, but we are clear now. I think IMF will not be surprised, because IMF itself in their last report says Sri Lankan debts are unsustainable. Debts are unsustainable means you can't pay the debt. There is that diplomatic parlor, but in other words, it says that you can't pay the debt. So it's like your name is in the crib. So now that hard default would have been like you are going into a crib. Now we are saying to reschedule it. That's what we are saying. We are saying our intention is there to pay, but our ability to pay is not there. So therefore, give us a little bit of time. Several countries have done in terms of, now for example, what is rescheduling is not that we are not paying. We will pay, but there are several tools on that. Reduction of capital payment, reduction of the interest payment, or push the payment due dates or maturity down the line. For example, Ecuador, if I am properly advised, they managed to get the payment rescheduled by 5 years. So you don't have a pressure right now. The economy can come back on track, and then thereafter can pay. So like Argentina got about 55% of a haircut. So 100 billion came down to 45 billion, for example. So several measures are there. So what we are trying to do is to negotiate that, appoint our legal advisors, appoint our financial advisors. They will take care of it. A separate group will look after that. In the meantime, we'll look at the bridging financing to get back on track. And with that, the pressure on our forex will be lessened. And then based on that, we will have enough money to support our day-to-day purchases and all those things. So if that happens, and if we have regular fuel supplies, regular gas supplies, no power cuts and all those things, our industries could come back. And then our development agenda can take place probably 9 to 12 months down the line. In the meantime, we might have to roll over our fiscal reforms within the government. So we have a fair idea of it. We will be presenting it to the IMF. We'll see what IMF can say. Hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, I'm sure India will support us in the interim. China will support us in the interim. Other countries like Paris Club, Japan, and the Western countries will support us in some way. World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and the IMF will also come out with some sort of money. So that will restore the confidence on the financial system. And I'm not so pessimistic about, just like many of the opposition leaders. We can get back on track. But yes, next year or so is going to be very painful.
But how are we going to overcome and remain patient over this 365-day period? People have undergone severe difficulty, but yet they're out on the streets because they cannot hold up. Again, let me ask you this question to Minister. Regardless of who we work with, we are going into either soft loans, credit lines, which means at some point, even if we default on our debt, we will have to pay back our loans for years to come. And at this juncture, investors do not want to come to Sri Lanka. How are you going to work about this while negotiating a deal with the IMF? I think you will look at these areas. To what plan do you have in place to attract investors, to generate income and revenue generating sources for the country?
No, it's not always the case. Some investors are smart enough. They understand when there is a depression, when there is low income or a country in tragedy, there is a lot of space and a lot of potential for growth. You know, they may come. You know, that's a possibility. So important thing is for us to restore our supply lines. That's number one. People shouldn't suffer. They don't deserve to be suffering this. So whatever it is, I know the prices of the fuel have gone almost 3 times. $37 when the COVID started have gone to 105, 110. So whatever it is, we must find a way to supply chains restoration. People should be out of the queues. They should have a direct supply of everything what is required, and there will be enough money to import the goods that is necessary. Hopefully the situation in Ukraine comes to some sort of a normalcy as soon as possible. So with all those things, yes, I'm cautiously optimistic, but yes, 9 to 10, 12 months can be very, very painful. But we have to endure those pains if we want a secure future. Otherwise, we'll crash land.
What of the monies from the diaspora? The President had discussions with the Tamil National Alliance also to figure out a way for diaspora monies to come into the country.
No, nothing had worked out as such. Now, some people I saw, unfortunately, have not understood any pain endured on the country because you are not happy with the rulers, ultimately results in disaster for the country. So my humble request is, you can protest, you can show your dissent, you can have your choice of electing or defeating anyone, but some or other see that our institutions are not harmed. Institution, when I say, our banking system should not be harmed, our supply chain should not be destroyed, our tourism should not be destroyed for a long period of time or disturbed. If our orders which are placed on our IT companies, textile and garment companies, goes to somewhere else, very difficult to take it back. So in view of that, my humble request is, understand this reality. You can fight political opinion, we have no problem with that. Being a lawyer, I respect the right of everyone to have the right to show dissent, fight, street protests, fine, but don't make it violent. Don't tell the foreigners or Sri Lankan migrant workers not to remit the funds through the proper channels. You are not hurting X, Y, or Z, you are hurting the Sri Lankan economy, Sri Lankan central bank, Sri Lankan banks. These are institutions. And when the supplies are in demand, you are not hurting few people there. You can have some sort of a temporary happiness saying that these people are suffering and that can be transformed against the government. No, as a result of which our industries are collapsing. Our orders are placed outside the country. Our industries like tea industry, all those things have been affected. Our tourism had been affected. You know the numbers now. You know, it has really affected 50% less than what it was in March or May up to now, February, March for this month up to the first 13-14 days. But these are not good indicators. So you can have your differences, but country is bigger than each and every one of us.
Finally, the central bank governor made a U-turn in some decisions that were taken, tightened policy in his first monetary policy meeting, and we see that he wanted the central bank to operate independently. That's what he says the central bank will do. But how are you going to work with these officials? What other decisions or measures will we see in the next couple of days and weeks to come as your first measures to rectify the situation? And also, before we wrap up, I want to ask you whether you got what it needs for Sri Lanka to patiently go past the difficult period of the next year.
Yeah, I'm not going to act on my own. I don't have ego. I understand that I have very limited knowledge on economy, so I'll be talking to several people, including the business community, international expert, local community, and fellow members of the parliament, and including the opposition lawmakers, and get their advice and put all the options available to me, and I'll take a decision which is best at the national interest, not my interest or my image or my party's image for that matter. So we must resurrect the economy and put that back on track. So whatever the decisions that we are going to make in coming days also, it's in that sense to protect our national interest. But in the meantime, as you say, we have no choice than doing this particular path: debt restructuring, fiscal reforms, talk to our friends, multilateral and bilateral countries. So all these measures have to be carefully taken without hurting the most vulnerable segment of our society. So our interest is right now how to provide some sort of a safety net to look after them. And
there were calls for relief measures or some social security for the hard hit. Are any
yes,
of those in the cards?
We are in fact, I am in discussion with the World Bank. We are given our proposals to them and we are discussing them. Hopefully I will discuss that when I meet the Vice President of the region in Washington. And then let's see how it goes. I'm optimistic that we have no choice. I mean, no one, I'm not denying that we are not in a terrible economic crisis. We are, and that's obvious. Everyone see that. So, but then we can't be overly pessimistic and give up. Countries have gone through worse than this crisis and come back. So we will come back. I'm sure Sri Lanka is a resilient nation. We have gone through, though economically not this much of a crisis, but we in our history. 71, 88 to 89, LTT war, we have made strong comeback. So I'm sure and I'm confident Sri Lankan nation collectively together will come out of this and come out stronger.
Thank you very much for your time here at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24.
Thank you.
Wish you all the very best in your talks with the IMF and negotiations going forward. We had with us the Finance Minister of Sri Lanka, President's Council Ali Sabry, joining us on AdaDerana 24 at Hyde Park. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.